All right, welcome modelers. This tutorial is for 3D02, which is creating a personalized keychain. In this project, we're going to get our project ready. We're going to make sure that our dimensions for our keychain are the appropriate size. We're going to create a base for our keychain model. Then we're going to create a key ring to attach to that base. We're going to align some shapes together to make sure that our keychain looks nice. We might even grab some models from the Thingiverse website to add to our key ring. And lastly, we're going to show how to export the STL so that way you can turn this into Schoology. Let's take a look at the specifications of this particular project. We can see here that we are going to be creating a personalized keychain. Really, it's a 50-point project. We're going to be creating a keychain with the following dimensions. It's going to be a 3 by 5 by 1 centimeter keychain. And the grading criteria, you need to use at least 2 letters or characters in your keychain. You need to use at least 5 shapes in your keychain. You need to have at least 1 hole that's been grouped with the main shape to create a keychain hole or a key ring hole. And you want to make sure that your model will print without obvious errors, that is, it is attached to the work plane, and that it doesn't have any glaring issues where it won't print out properly. So let's take a look at some, here's a few examples of some keychains here. We've got some that are half ring keychains. We've got some that are full ring keychains. We've got some that have sports jersey numbers, names perhaps, or shapes. You can make it for somebody else. Here's one that's in remembrance of somebody. Here's one that's just a general gaming keychain. And we have all looks in between here. We have one that has a QR code, so if you took a picture of it with your phone, you would be taken to a website. And over here we have just some general shapes over here. So let's get into how we can create these projects. First, we have to get our project ready. So we're going to go into TinkerCAD here. When you go into TinkerCAD and after you log in, you'll see this screen, which is the recent designs. You can get back to your recent designs at any point by clicking on the TinkerCAD waffle up here on the top left. So if you click on that, it will take you to this design page. We're going to create a new design here, so I'm going to click on Create New Design. All right, now the first step is we have to rename what our project is called. So up here on the very top left of the TinkerCAD website, you're going to see that it randomly names your project. We're going to change this name. I'm going to put my name and then keychain. And this is actually my 3rd iteration of this, so I'm going to put keychain 3. There we go. Make sure that you put your name on there somewhere. That way when you get it printed out, I can tell which one is yours. Otherwise, I'll have no idea which keychain model is yours. All right, so we've changed the name of our model. Let's get into first setting up the initial base of our keychain. So I'm going to use a box to do this. I'm just going to click on box and drag that down here. And now we can see that I have this box set up and ready. Let's go through some of the basic functionality of TinkerCAD to start. First thing to know is if you right click, you can pivot around an object. If you hold down the middle mouse button, you're able to move the camera inside of the 3D space. If you press the mouse wheel, if you roll it forward or backwards, that's how you can zoom in on an object. And lastly, if you click on an object, it selects it, and it shows this blue line around it, and it also shows these different controls. If you have an object selected, like this cube, if I click over here on this box, the fit view to selected shapes, or I press the F key, it's going to center the view on that object. So now if I look around it, you'll see that it perfectly centers that object and allows me to rotate around it very easily. All right, when we have an object that's placed into the blueprint, as you see here, or into the 3D modeling area, you'll see that there's a shape properties up here, this little box up here. If you click on this little diagonal, or this little arrow, it allows you to see the properties or to hide them. I'm going to show them so we can take a look at what they do. If you click right here on these, this red, or this circle right here that says solid, this allows you to change the color of your model here. So here's all these custom these basic swatches that are put in here. If I click on any one of these, you'll see that it will change the shape, or it'll change the color of your model to fit that color. You can make your objects transparent. So if I click on this, you can see that it makes my shape clear. And also you can click on the custom setting right here to be able to pick a very specific color. So I can choose any color that I want out of the rainbow, and then I can choose what shade of a color I want here on the inside. So there's plenty of fun stuff that you can do as far as picking your colors. I'm just going to pick a basic color of purple here and work from there. All right, so some important things to know about the objects that once you've placed them down into TinkerCAD, there's a few different things that we can do to edit the objects size. So first, on each one of the sides of the object, you're going to have this black dot here. This, if you click and drag, will allow you to change just that one side. So I can change it to where it's longer. I can change it to where it's thinner here. There's a length, width, can all be changed right here. Now, if you click on one of the white squares, then you're changing both of them. You're changing both the length and the width of that object. So here you can see I can rescale it just by clicking and dragging with the mouse right here. Now you're going to notice that when I click and drag, it scales to a very specific amount. And that, in this case, if I zoom in real close, you can see that it's one of these small squares right here. If you wanted to change how much that snaps, you can go down to the bottom, down on the bottom right down here, where it says Snap Grid. And if I click on that, I can change how much it will snap to. So if I wanted it to snap to 5 millimeters instead of 1, now when I click and drag, you'll see that it will only snap to that amount. And if I make it less, like 0.1 here, you'll see that it makes it even smaller in terms of how far apart that the grid will snap to. So depending on what you're trying to snap to, you'll change this snap grid. I'm just going to set it to 1 millimeter just to be on the default here. What we're going to do is we're going to change the size of this to make sure that it fits the dimensions of the specifications on the project. So to do that, I can click on one of these white squares down here, and you're going to notice that these numbers appear over here on the sides. These are the dimensions, in centimeters in this case, of this particular object. So what I want to do is I want to make one of these 30, which would make it 3 centimeters. Each one of these is in millimeters, by the way, so 30 millimeters would be 3 centimeters. And over here, I'm going to make this 50 millimeters or 5 centimeters. As for how tall it can be, you can get it to be up to 1 millimeter in height, which is a pretty tall keychain here. I'm going to make mine a little bit less. I'm going to make mine down to 6. There we go. That should be pretty good for me. And that's how you can resize the dimensions of something. You'll notice this white square here in the top center of the object. If you click and drag this, this changes how tall the object is. And if you look over here on the very, very top here, you'll see that there is a cone. If I click and I drag that cone, that changes how far off of the ground or the print bed that this object is. So you'll notice that when I click and I drag this, there's 2 numbers. This one is how high off of the ground this object is. And this, I'm sorry, this is how tall the object is. And this is how high off of the ground it is. So this is basically shows how much I'm manipulating or how much I'm changing the height of the distance between the floor and the object. So I want to make sure at this distance, if you want to make sure that your object is exactly flush against the ground, just change this number down here to 0. And bam, it'll put it down for you. Perfect. All right. So now that I've got this to where it is the appropriate dimensions, I'm going to check out some of the other parameters that I have here for my shape, or other properties that I have. Over on the right, I have this radius slider. And if I move that radius slider, you're going to see that it smooths out the edges of your shape a little bit. It also puts a little bit of a rounded edge on the bottoms and the tops of our object. So this just makes it to where it's a little bit nicer. It's not super sharp here on the edges, so it's not going to catch on your clothes or anything. You can just basically make it a little bit less rough there, or a little bit less sharp there. You can also change how many steps your object has. So if I had this have more of a radius here, the steps will be more obvious as to what happens. You can see here that I have very few steps. It just cuts the object into different steps here. So I have different polygons or different sides that can be added to this shape. If you put a lot of steps on there, then it'll make it very, very rounded, which is what I'm going to do in this case. All right, so now I've got my shape here pretty much rounded out and ready to go. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this shape and I'm going to duplicate it. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the shape, and then I'm going to go up here to where it says duplicate and repeat, or you can press Control D to do this. I press duplicate, and it looks like nothing happened. Well, actually, something did happen. It duplicated the object, but it placed the object inside of the original object. So if I wanted to move this around, I could click on this cone right here and drag it up, and you'll see that, there it is. It has been duplicated in here. Additionally, what you could do is you could hold down Control on the keyboard and press the up or down arrows. This allows you also to pick up or set down an object. If I use the arrow keys by themselves, that lets me move around the object just in free space. And if I use Control and up and down, it lets me move them up and down in free space. All right, so now I've got this object and it's floating directly above its original object. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this object into a hole, the top one here. I'm going to turn it into a hole and cut it out of the object down below. To do that, I'm going to click right up here where it says hole, or you could press the H key, and it turns the object that you have selected into a hole. Now, when it's a hole, basically, if you group this holed object with a solid object that it's colliding with, you're going to cut the hole out of the solid object. So if I move this down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this slightly smaller. I'm going to scale it from the center to make it just fit inside of the original shape here. So I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt on the keyboard, and when I click and drag one of these corners, you're going to see that it scales it proportionally from the middle, from the center. So basically I have these two objects perfectly aligned to each other, and I'm just going to make this object a little bit smaller than the original. There we go. I'm going to put it about there. Now you can see that my object is not perfectly aligned anymore. I must have done something wrong, but that's okay. I can align this fairly easily. I'm going to select both of the objects by holding down Shift and clicking on each one. Now I can see that they're both selected here. Now I'm going to align them by pressing the L key or going up here to where it says Align. When I do that, I'm going to see these bubbles appear. And what I want to do is I want to align these objects to where they're perfectly aligned in the center with each other. So if I press Align, I can see that these two center bubbles are grayed. That means that it's already perfectly aligned. Perfect. All right. So now if I just move this shape down a little bit, I can press it into my other shape. I'm just going to drag it down a little bit, and you're going to see that it's beginning to take up space down here. Perfect. You can see that it's getting into the middle of this object. I can adjust the size of the sides if I want to change the overall look. But I just want to make sure that my object is pushing down into the solid shape a little bit. My whole object here, I'm going to push it down into it. And if you zoom in, you can see where the object, how far down that object is cutting into the other hole here, or the other solid object. So I can see it's going about down to where this dotted line is showing up here. Now, if I select both of these objects by holding down Shift and selecting both of them, I can now group them together to cut the hole out of the solid. So right up here where you see the group command, it's Control G, or you can press group, and it's going to cut the whole area out of the solid. So here I can see that I have what looks kind of like a soap bar holder here, and it's ready to have some shapes and stuff put into it. On top of this, you can use you could use other shapes. You don't have to use a square for your keychain. You could use something else. But I would suggest that you put some kind of a lip around the outside just to protect your inner shapes from getting affected. All right, so now that I have this shape ready, I'm going to put a tube down. So I'm going to grab this tube. I'm going to set it over here on the side. And now this is what's going to attach to my key ring right here. So I'm going to attach the base to this key ring. Now if we look over at this this key ring, we've got the radius, which changes how big or wide the ring is. We've got the wall thickness, which affects how thick the wall is. You want to make sure your wall isn't like super thin like this. It will break very easily. You want to make sure you've got at least a decent amount of thickness so that way it doesn't just break. So I'm going to make it about there. That looks pretty good. Some other things that you'll see, there's a size slider, so you can make it to where your key ring is a triangle or a square or a pentagon or any kind of thing that you'd like. I'm going to make mine perfectly round, so I'm going to make it have 64 sides. You'll see something here that says bevel. This allows you to change the side of the ring here to where it has kind of a rounded edge to it. Instead of being super sharp like that, you can make it have a rounded edge. I'm going to do that just to make it look better. That's pretty good right there. And you can also change how many bevel segments there are, so that way you can make it nice and rounded if you wanted to. That looks pretty good. I like that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to have less bevel segments. I like it when it's just rounded like that. Perfect. All right, now I'm going to make sure that it is about the same size as the other one. I made this one 6 centimeters in height. As you can see, I'll change that back to 6. Make sure that this is set to 6 as well. Good. Now they should be exactly the same height from each other. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is aligned to the center of my other object. So I'm going to hold down Shift and select both of the objects. I'm going to click on Align right here, and you're going to see that, oh, it's already been aligned. Perfect. So I've aligned this perfectly to the center. If I click over here on the on this ring, I'm going to make sure that it's attached to my key ring. Now, something important to note: if I just barely push these two things together like this, this will work okay. However, there's a good chance that this is going to break over time because it's attached very, very slightly to the base. So what you're probably going to want to do is you're probably going to want to take your key ring and put it in fairly far into the other part of your base here. Just that way there's a nice long connection to it. That way it won't break very easily. I think this looks pretty good right here. All right, so now I've got my key ring attached. If I want to attach both of these objects together, I can hold down Shift and select both of the objects, and then press Control G or press the group command to be able to group them together. Now, if I made an error and I wanted to move this back, I can, of course, click on the object, and there's an ungroup section right here. Ungroup is Control Shift and G. If you press that, it will ungroup the objects, and you'll notice that you can continue to do that right here. If I wanted to ungroup this one, it would show my hole and all that I did before as well. So just so you know, you can ungroup things, and you can ungroup multiple times so you can get all the pieces off of a model in case you need to. All right, so now I've assigned it all to be in this one section. By the way, if you wanted to have different color information, if I have different things that were in my model that had different colors, and I grouped them and they all changed to one color, you can go up here to where it says solid and change the color to multicolor, and it'll bring your colors back to what the original was. Your model is still grouped. As you can see, if I click and drag it, it still is grouped together. But now I'm able to basically have all the color information that I had before. Pretty cool. All right. That said, let's go to the next phase of this, which is adding some text. Some text, there's a few different places you can grab text. Over on the right side where it says TinkerCAD Basic Shapes, you're going to see something that says text right here. If you click and drag that, you'll see that it will add a text shape. What does the text say? Well, that's determined upon this little entry up here where it says text. If you click on that text field right here, you can change what it says. So I'm going to just go in here and type in DATA. You can see that it changes what the text says down here. And you can also change what font you want to use over here as well. There's a few different fonts that you could use. You can also bevel your text, so that way it changes how it looks a little bit. You can change how many segments there are. So this will kind of round out the sides of your bevel here. So you can see that I'm making the text kind of stick out and have these rounded edges on the top. So that's what you can do with the bevel and segment section here. You can change how rounded you want that text to appear. I like that look right there. It looks pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to fit it to my my selection over here by holding down Shift and Alt once again and dragging. And you can see that I can change how big this is from the center. Make sure it get it about where I want it to be, and there we go. That looks pretty good. I like that. All right, so I move this. If I use my arrow keys, I can specifically pick where I want my objects to be. Make sure that I pick a good spot. And if I can't get it right where I want it to be, I could, of course, simply hold down Shift. I'm going to ungroup these objects so I can just make it select this one part. Let me group these together. All right, so I have my text right here. I want to hold down Shift, and I'm going to select this and my other object here. That way I can center them perfectly. I'm going to go to Align, and I'm going to click this in the middle here, and now my data, this word, has been aligned exactly to the middle of my other object. There we go. I like that. That looks pretty good. Now, if I select that object, I can move it up or down. I kind of like it where it is now, though. I think I'll leave it right there. And now my text is all ready to go. Excellent. Now, the last thing you might want to do is you're going to want to add some shapes or some other things in here. So what you could do is you could use the scribble tool. If you click on the scribble tool and put this somewhere, you can draw an object out. So if I wanted to draw a little happy face here, I could do that and then press done. And you're going to see that that object appears as a little drawing here. You can scale it just the same way that you would with any other object. So as you can see here, I'm going to just take this object. I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. I'm going to put it in here, and you can see that you can basically draw your own objects if you would like to. I'm going to move it over here on the side, and I want it to be 6 centimeters tall. There we go, or 6 millimeters. It's good. I want to also make this 6 millimeters tall. There we go. Because my edges are 6 millimeters tall, I'm going to make everything that tall, just that way it all looks nice and uniform. Cool. All right, so I made a little happy face there. That looks pretty cool. However, let's get into some other shapes that we have. There's a whole bunch of basic shapes over here, like you can grab a star shape, for example. I can take this and I can scale it. I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to make it, I'm going to raise it off of the floor here. I'm going to move it where I want. Let's try moving it on this side. There we go. Now remember, you can use the hotkeys. If you hold down Control and the arrow keys, you're able to move your object up and down. There we go. So I'm just going to put this star right there. That's good. I like the way that looks. Excellent. All right. There's more shapes than just this, though. If you wanted to look at the more advanced shapes, you could go out of the basic shapes area, and you could go to where there are shape generators. So if you go into the all shape generators, there's a whole bunch of different interesting styles of shapes that you can find here. In fact, there are some other types of text here as well. So there's text here. There's special custom font text. There's a text ring where you can get the text to stand up and go around in a circle. And there's also a script to where you can make it say different things. So right here, I have text, but it's more of a cursive style text instead of the basic text that we have here. So let's see what we can find here. I'm going to put JHS. There we go. So now we can see that this font is slightly more stylized than the previous one. I'm going to take this and just rescale it. I'm going to put it up here. In fact, I might put this up higher. I'll take my data shape here, put this down lower, and then I'm going to take my other shapes here and move them up. There we go. I kind of like that. That looks good. I might want to move this one slightly. I'm going to make it scale. There we go. And then after you scale it, make sure that you bring the height up to the appropriate level. That's pretty good right there. JHS data. I like it. All right, now, in case you wanted to add a special shape, besides just these shapes that are in the shape generators, there's a whole bunch of them, by the way. If you look down at the very bottom right, there's some more arrows that you could click on, and you can see that there's a whole bunch of more types of shapes you can make. For example, snowflake. You can add how many different, what the radius is. You can add how long the parameters are. Every shape is going to have some kind of slider here that you can play around with and get different shapes out of it. So very helpful just to drop them down and see what they do. For example, the flower one here, if I grab the flower, at first it doesn't look like a flower, but then if I change what the petals, number of petals there are, I can start to see they start to come out. I can take a petal length and put them out more. And then we can rescale it. And you can see that you can make all kinds of different shapes using these parameters that are on these sliders over here. I'm not going to use this shape. Instead, I'm going to show you how you can go into Thingiverse to grab a model to add to this in case you didn't want to use one of these basic shapes. So I'm going to go into just to Google, and I'm going to type in Thingiverse. Thingiverse is a website that has all kinds of digital designs for physical objects. And you can basically click up here where it says search Thingiverse and find something that you want to put in there. So I'm going to try to find a Viking. And I can see that there's all these different Viking shapes here. I'm going to grab this first one here. There's all kinds of different options that you could potentially click and look at. Actually, I really like this one, so I'm going to click on that. And then once you're here, it gives you a close view of what it is. But in order to actually download the file, you don't want to go up here to where it says download all files. What you want to do is scroll down a little bit until you see something that says thing files right here. Click on the thing files, and then you're going to see the different models that make up that particular 3D model. So in this case, there's 3 STL files that make it up. It looks like these two are just some little pieces that attach to the sides of this as a necklace, but this one down here looks like it has the actual Viking on it. So I'm going to click on that. And you're going to see it downloads that file as an STL. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into TinkerCAD, and I'm going to click up here in the top right where it says import, and I'm going to import a 3D file. When it says choose a file, I'm going to click on that button, and I'm going to go to my downloads folder, and I'm going to select the STL that I just downloaded, which is this one right here. When I do that, I'm going to click on import, It's going to take a few moments, but it's going to import that file into your project here. So you should see an STL file suddenly appear. Now it may be way bigger than the original. In this case, okay, it looks pretty good here. It's a little bit bigger than my layout here, so I'm going to have to resize it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two shapes off. Now I don't really need these. I'm going to move these so that way I have enough room for that object here. There we go. And now I'm going to take this and just resize it. Holding down Alt and Shift, I can resize it from the middle without having to mess around with it too much. And then I'm going to move this down and put it down in here. All right. I'm going to just push this down onto my other objects. There we go. That looks pretty good right there. I like how this looks. I'm going to move it up just a little bit. I think it looks good right there. Might move it over to the side. I might even flatten this out a little bit. I might change the size of this text just to make it look good. Kind of move this over a little bit. Make it a little bit taller. There we go. I like how this is looking. I might increase the size of this one a little bit. So once you got your objects approximately where you want them, in this case, I think that's pretty good right there. Now we're ready to export this. Oh, it looks like my text is a little bit too tall. Let me bring that down to 6. There we go. You're going to want to do a quick once over just to check all of your handiwork, making sure that there's nothing that's sticking out way too far or sticking out of the bottom. You want to make sure that this can all print rather easily. So there we go. I've got this set. Now all I have to do is select all of the objects. I'm going to group them. So now I can see it. They'll change into one finalized product here. Now it's going to change when you group everything together. It will change it to where they look the same color unless you have multicolor selected right here under your shapes option here. So it will potentially look all one color like this. And when you print it out, it will all be one color as well, unless we take the time to do multiple different types of filaments. But for now, you should just know that it's going to basically be one color here. So I have my axes. I've got everything to where it just sits on top of this base here, and we have everything all ready. Now, to actually submit this as a file for project, or to get credit for it, we're going to click on Export up here on the top right, and then make sure you include everything in the design. Click on this little bubble right here, and then you want to click on STL. And that's going to save it as an STL file, and you'll see it show up down here on the bottom left. So this is where it shows that I have my Keychain STL3. So this is the file that you're going to turn into Schoology. You're going to turn in this STL file. You're also going to want to record a video screencast. So to do that, you press the Windows key and G on your keyboard for the Windows game bar. And then you're going to record a video of you going around this object. So once you have the game bar starting to record, you click on the object here. You click on that fit view to selected shapes, or press F. And then you just right click and kind of go around the object, showing it off from all the different angles. If you did something interesting or specific, like in this case, this Viking face, you might want to zoom in on it and kind of show it off from different angles. And once you're all done with that, then you press stop on the top right-hand corner over here. You should see a little thing pop up to where you can stop the recording. It's going to save your recording in the videos/captures file in your profile. So that's where you can find the video that you'll submit as well. You need to submit both of those things, an STL file of your model and a video screencast, an MP4 video file of you showing off that project, and that will give you full credit. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I can't wait to see what you come up with.